Hello. Well, today I'm asking, what's it like for you to go shopping when you have a disability? What barriers do you face? What would make your shopping trip easier, better? What would make you spend more? Call 03700 100 444 or email youandyours@bbc.co.uk. You can tweet us, use the hashtag #youandyours, or you can send us a text message to 84844. The reason we're doing this is because today is Purple Tuesday. Hundreds of shops have signed up to a day aimed at encouraging retailers to make it easier for people with disabilities to shop with them. And you'll hear the man behind the campaign later in the programme. If you're disabled, what do you think needs fixing in shops? It's 23 years since the Disability Discrimination Act and 8 years since that became the Equalities Act, and they were supposed to make shopping an equivalent experience for all. Did it work for you? What's changed? What about online shopping? That might have been a game changer for you. But of course, shopping isn't only about buying stuff. It's as much about having a social experience as well. How easy is it for you to mooch about the shops, meet up with friends, or pop into a cafe or a restaurant? If you have a disability, maybe it's visible, maybe it isn't. Tell me what it's like to shop when you live with that disability. Call 03700 100 444 or email youandyours@bbc.co.uk. Well, let's hear from some callers. First, Mike called in from Stockport.
Well, shopping for me is fine because I know what I can do and I do it. And what suits me, but it might not suit everybody else. The disabled are just as different as everybody else.
And what's your disability?
I've got a severe mobility problem. It's a neurological degenerative condition, which is like 1 in 100,000.
So physically getting around and reaching for things off shelves is tricky for you?
Well, reaching things off high shelves and low shelves is difficult. If I'm not holding on to something stable, I can't reach for anything high or low. But difficulty thing is also getting about. For example, Tesco's and John Lewis have got very slippy floors. So very difficult to have a grip on mobility on that. It's all right if you're in a wheelchair because you can just scoot through, except John Lewis don't allow people in mobility scooters. And supermarkets have mobility scooters to people to do the shopping, but my experience quite often is that they're not available. Either they're not maintained, they're not in the state of operation, they're not there.
So what you're getting at there is they might seem as though there are things to help people with disabilities do their shopping in a sensible way. But actually, what you're saying is it's tokenism.
To a large extent, it's tokenism, but to a large extent, it's following the recipe because somebody somewhere has defined what disabled people need. And then somebody else puts it in place. And they're not necessarily disabled, so they don't really know. They just follow the recipe. It's got open doors, and self-opening doors and whatever, air conditioning and flat floors. It's got a disabled toilet. And it's okay for the big boys because they build new premises all the time. The difficulty is local shops, and quite often they're the fronts of what used to be houses. So invariably there's a step up from the pavement to the shop, which if you're in a wheelchair is impossible. If you're mobility impaired, it is possible. Some of them have got grip handles on, but you do have to have a strong voice to say, I need some help, please. Can somebody come and help me?
Mike, thank you. Well, Michael is in Home Firth. Does what Mike said in Stockport, does that echo your experience as well?
Oh, very much so, yes. And because Home Firth is mainly local businesses, shopping in Home Firth is a bit of a non-event for me. I belong to a group called Square Pegs, which is set up for disabled people. And we have people with all sorts of disabilities, mobility problems like myself, sight problems, learning difficulties. We meet once a week with no set agenda. So I suggested to the group that we should do an accessibility survey of Home Firth.
And what did you find in the survey?
So what we did was we surveyed 150 premises, and we found, not to our great surprise, that the vast majority of them are completely inaccessible. What was perhaps more encouraging was we did find that there are other places where, through simple improvements, we could have got into those premises. Things like having a portable ramp in the shop with a notice in the window, giving a number to call to get someone to come out. Doing business on the pavement's not much of an option in Home Firth as a rule because it rains a lot. You really don't want to be trying to transact on the pavement. Also,
and transacting on the pavement isn't exactly an equal experience, is it?
No.
Oh, by the way, you have a disability, therefore you have to be outside.
But just by chance, we found out that in Hebden Bridge, which is a town very like Holmfirth. It's an old mill town. They had done a similar sort of survey together with the local council. And as a result of that, the local council has been providing shops with portable ramps. And also this group created an access map of Hebden Bridge showing which pavements were good to get along with either a wheelchair or a buggy for that matter, and which shops you could get into. And we would like to get to that point in Holmfirth.
Well, this is Purple Tuesday. Now, it seems like, another shopping day with a different colour, but this is unique this day. It's the very first time it's happened. Do you welcome initiatives like this?
I've had a look at some of the Purple Tuesday advertising. I think at the moment it's aimed much more at the kind of the Tesco's and the Sainsbury's, as we were talking about with Mike from Stockport. But it needs to be more relevant for small private businesses, because obviously for them there is some cost involved, but the benefit for them is that they get more people coming. At the moment, if you look on social media, see what some disabled people say about Holmfirth, they say they would never bother going there to do their shopping because they know it's so inaccessible. That seems to me to be completely wrong.
Michael in Holmfirth, thank you. Well, Jenny in Norfolk is listening to that. Jenny, just explain what your disability is first.
Right, well, I'm not very good from the waist down. I have limited mobility. I fell off a horse, injured my back, and it just got progressively worse over the years.
So what's your experience of shopping, not necessarily in the major stores, the Tesco's, Sainsbury's, Asda's, etc., but in smaller shops, in villages?
A lot of them are very, very good. And if I can't get out, if I can't get into them, they'll actually come out and serve me on the pavement, which I don't find offensive.
Don't you? That's really interesting, because many people do. They say, I am excluded. I have to be out here in the rain.
The sort of thing that really annoys me is when they've made an effort to go for disabled and it's not done properly. A couple of years ago, I phoned up a restaurant I'd heard was very nice. Do you have wheelchair access? Oh, yes, we've got wheelchair access. We've got a ramp, blah, blah, blah. Now, do you have a disabled toilet? Oh, yes, we have a nice disabled toilet. It's on the next floor. So how the hell am I? If I need a wheelchair to go into space, how the hell do I get up the stairs?
What did they say to that when you said, hang on a second?
Well, not really much. That was it. I can go in the home. I go upstairs on all fours. I come down on my bottom. I don't mind doing that at home, but I don't want to do it in public. The bigger stores, some of them are very good. I find a lot of the supermarkets, Morrison's in particular, their mobility scooters are always working fantastic. Department stores, some are very good, but some are terrible. They like to have their lines of goods in at angles. Instead of going straight, so you can go up it, turn around the bottom and go up the next one, they don't do that. They have them all at funny angles. So you have to try and manoeuvre yourself round, or sometimes actually have to back out because I can't turn around at the bottom because there's just not enough space.
The examples that you're showing, Jenny, are all about thought.
No, that is definitely it. I would say that anybody designing any of these stores should actually have to do it with a mobility scooter. Because if they do it with a mobility scooter, they will find out. Toilets I find particularly objectionable. Some of them, they seem to think if they put a couple of handrails in, that makes a toilet a disabled toilet. It doesn't. I'm better off than a lot because I can stand on my legs and I can sort of turn around, but I can't move very far like that. But if you needed somebody to actually take you to the toilet, or you needed to actually get your wheelchair alongside the toilet, you couldn't do it because there isn't the room. I've actually had to sit on the toilet with the door open because I've been unable to get my wheelchair in.
And that's into an actual disabled toilet, not just an ordinary toilet.
Disabled toilet.
That's Jenny from Norfolk. Well, in the studio listening to that is Peter White. He's the presenter of You and Yours, but he's also been making programmes for and about disabled people for many, many years, and he's been blind from birth. Peter, apart from the fact you're sitting in my chair and I'm sitting in yours, what's shopping been like for you?
I think for a blind person, one of the difficulties is actually exercising choice. We haven't heard that from the shopping. I mean, Our problem is knowing actually what's there. One of the functions of shopping is to actually be able to pick, to be able to browse, and that's a very difficult thing to do if you can't see. What it needs, of course, is help from people. And one of the dangers of this kind of programme is that people always think that you're actually getting at them for not doing it. Often you can get enormous amounts of help. But see, Jenny has really hit the nail on the head, I think, which is we find it very difficult as a human, in the human race, to get inside somebody else's skin who is not really like us. We find it difficult emotionally, and we find it difficult physically. So people can't imagine what it's like. There's also an enormous variety of disability. People tend to tick boxes and think, well, there we are, we've done that now. And so I think Jenny in some ways has hit the nail on the head. So some people may say, well, will legislation really help that? I think it does, because I think the problem was people always used to say, we don't need laws, we need to educate people. But that's really complicated. You actually need a framework of law to make sure that it happens.
So the Disability Discrimination Act came in 1995, and that became the Equalities Act in 2010. In your experience, have you seen much change? There's been physical change, there's been ramps, there are disabled toilets, but what about the way shoppers are treated when they're in the shop?
I don't think that has really changed a great deal, because it depends so much on the individual and how they react to you. And you're really expecting, we actually need, it's almost got to be, it's such a big societal change. It's a shame in a way, because I feel I've been talking about this for so long, and yet sometimes I have experiences which make me think I've been completely wasting my time. That doesn't mean we shouldn't ought to do it.
What sort of experiences have you had where you've thought that? Well,
I think it's mainly where people just can't get the idea that you are able to function as a human being. I go into shops, I'm trying to try on clothes. People, if I'm with somebody else, they immediately make the assumption that they're my carer. So they talk to them and not to me. Now, legislation doesn't change that kind of thing, and it doesn't matter. You could say, I've got a double first in nuclear physics, and they'd still think that you were not able to make these kind of decisions, and you needed a carer to do the simplest thing.
Now, I know you shop online, don't you? You are completely blind, so how does that work?
Well, I don't shop very successfully online, but a lot of blind people do, because they're cleverer than I am. It works because computers now have speech, and they have braille, and you can go online, and the speech and the braille will recognise words. But the problem, of course, is that there's a lot of other things on websites. There are a lot of pictures, there's a lot of advertising, and therefore that gets in the way. And you can quite understand why people want their graphics to be whizzy and exciting, but it does actually make it quite a difficult thing to do. On the other hand, a lot of blind people would say that online shopping has made an enormous difference, and quite a lot of shops have done their best to produce for example, quite often they will produce plain text things, but then people say, I don't want that because it's not the same as everybody else has got. So you are dealing with a bit of a minefield.
So what do you reckon on this idea of Purple Tuesday, where we have a day and there's sort of trumpets and fanfares, and everybody says, oh yes, let's make it better, but it's one day?
Well, I think that's my reservation. I know you've got Mike Adams on who will talk about this, but the danger is that with a day like this, everybody feels very good about themselves, and they think they've done it, and they've done, and then we go back. I have grown to feel that the solution to this is a very complicated one, and that actually has to do with us being perhaps rather cleverer than human beings are, by this whole business of understanding how other people work, being able to see the whole picture of someone else's life. And I still think that Jenny perhaps has hit that nail on the head. And I've been talking about this probably for 30 or 40 years, and I still don't completely know what the answer is.
Peter White, thank you. In touch tonight?
Yes, talking about ex-servicemen, blind ex-servicemen, 8:40.
Brilliant. It's 12:31. You're listening to You and Yours on BBC Radio 4 with me, Shari Val. Today we're asking, what's it like shopping if you have a disability? It's Purple Tuesday, the first national day dedicated to the needs of disabled people. Tell me what you've found that works and what doesn't. Call 03700 100 444. You can email you and yours at bbc.co.uk. But first, here's Sarah Montague with what's coming up in the world at 1.
Thanks very much, Shari. We'll be talking no deal on the programme today. We're running out of time for a Brexit deal to be struck, and governments, organisations and businesses need to start contingency planning. What do they need to do, and how could it affect us all? We've also had the news that wages have risen at the fastest pace in nearly a decade in the 3 months to September. We'll be considering what that means for the economy. And the nectar of the gods proves not to be so immortal after all. Ambrosia, the makers of cream rice pudding and custard, face closure unless a buyer can be found. We'll be sampling some rice pudding in the programme, Shari.
Ooh, lovely. Sarah, thank you. Well, on today's Call You and Yours, we're asking, what's it like for you to go shopping when you have a disability? The purple pound, the term used to describe the spending power of people with disabilities, is estimated to be worth more than £200 billion in the UK alone. What would make you spend more? Maybe you work in retail. What's it like trying to deal with the needs of disabled shoppers? Call us now. 03700 100 444. You can email you and yours at bbc.co.uk. You can tweet using the hashtag you and yours, or you can simply send us a text message to 84844. Karen Drake is in Colchester. Karen, what's been your experience?
I've been using a wheelchair for many years. 2 comments to make to some of the callers come in. Some towns have access maps showing which shops are available to get into, which doors you can use, and where the dropped curbs are. 2, for example, are Ipswich and Plymouth. Why can't more towns do that?
It's great if you live in Ipswich and Plymouth, but what if you don't live in Ipswich and Plymouth?
But if they can do it, why can't some others?
And does it make a real difference?
Sorry?
Does it make a real difference to your experience?
Yes, it does, if you're a stranger to them. When I was with the Access Group for Colchester, it was put forward that we should do something similar, but it was said that places change too frequently.
So that means you just can't get in at all?
Yeah. And some councils, I used to have a shop in Halstead, and we wanted to put or at least a slope to the front door. Braintree Council made it very, very difficult, and it wasn't eventually done for about 6 years before we got permission to do it.
And that was you as a retailer?
Outside and serving.
That was you as a retailer?
Me as a retailer.
So what did you find that actually helped people? Yes, a ramp. Yes, easy access to get into the shops. But what about actually shopping? Well,
I was with the jewellery. You don't really want to show jewellery on the high street. So having a ramp was really essential to get people to be able to come in. I've also had the same problem with loos being too small and having to leave the doors open. But to get actually to the shop, you've got to have a dropped curb to get up onto the pavement and then have access into the shop.
Well, Karen, Colchester, thank you very much. Sandy Taylor is in Kirkintilloch near Glasgow. Have I pronounced that correctly?
Yes, you've done well there.
Now, you're interested in shared space schemes. Tell me what your view of that is.
Well, in my local town, they installed a shared space scheme around 2 years ago. I used to be able to access my high street, be able to go to the shops using a white cane, as I'm totally blind. However, now I do not go near my town. It is a no-go area for me and hundreds of other disabled people, not just blind people, but people with many other disabilities. Simply because they have taken away all the traffic lights on a busy four-way junction, for instance, taken away all the controlled crossings, and the curbs are reduced to a mere 20 millimetres, which is no more than a trip hazard.
So 20 millimetres you can't feel with your feet.
I can't feel with my cane either, to be honest, so I could quite easily end up on the carriageway.
So everybody saluted these shared space schemes, saying they're fantastic. You take the barriers away, it's much safer for people because the cars won't run over people. But from what you're saying, Sandy, nobody thought about people with disabilities.
Absolutely. We can't, if I stand at the side of the road, I'm supposed to make eye contact with drivers who will let me cross. I can't even see a vehicle approaching. With electric silent vehicles, I'm not going to play Russian roulette and simply step onto the carriageway. So I'm afraid I have to avoid the area altogether. And I've been a retailer all my life, and I feel for the shopkeepers. I want to give them my business. But unfortunately, the footfall has fallen dramatically, and many are closing their doors.
Sandy near Glasgow, thank you. Well, Jim Perman is in Kidderminster. Jim, what's your experience?
Well, we have 2 stores in Kidderminster which are particularly helpful. Our Sainsbury's store, first of all, has nice wide aisles so that 2 wheelchairs could pass.
Well, that is wide. That really is quite wide.
It's certainly better than a lot of places, yes. But also, they have a scheme for what they call assisted shopping. If we go into the customer service desk just inside the door and ask for an assisted shop, they will contact a member of staff who will then push my wife around in the wheelchair and help her to get all the things that she needs, then push her to the till. While they're doing that, because I use crutches, I sit in a chair conveniently placed by the till until they arrive, and then I can help pay and so on.
What you're highlighting there is actually not necessarily physical things, but actually human contact.
Absolutely, yes.
And that could be where lots of other places fail. Jim in Kidderminster, thank you. Well, John Douglas is with me in the You and Your studio with your emails.
Yeah,
is that a familiar experience for people?
Well, just picking up on what Jim was saying about a positive experience, Mary Phillips from Sutton in Surrey, she's emailed to say she has had only a positive experience of shopping in a well-known store which sells both clothing and food. She says, my twin sister and I are totally blind. We find the staff are particularly helpful. One of us goes there at least once a week. The staff know as well. Sometimes they'll ask if we've tried a certain product or will tell us about a new product. Just picking up as well on what Peter was saying earlier about internet shopping when you can't see. Philip wrote in to say that he and his wife are totally blind. They shop for food and sometimes clothes online, but find that because web pages are constantly changing, they find it's not always possible for them to use websites. He says the only time they actually go shopping is if they can find someone to go with them.
It's interesting Peter said that about the constant changes. Well, today is Purple Tuesday, and Mike Adams is the man behind it. He's the chief executive of Purple. It's a disability organisation which advises businesses, and he's on the line from London. Mike, welcome to You and Yours. What's your experience been shopping?
Well, I think I reflect some of the experiences of your callers. And when we first started out thinking about Purple Tuesday, it was on the back of me going to a shopping centre and a non-scientific experiment. We went into 27 shops that day, and in 23 of those shops, either the shop assistant avoided us altogether or only spoke to my partner. And I think someone talked about human contact, and in many ways this is what Purple Tuesday is about. It's about giving staff the confidence to walk up to someone and go, hello, can I help you? And I think in 2018 it is not now about prejudice, but a fear of unintentionally offending an individual through not perhaps understanding the language and etiquette, and actually as a default swerving the conversation altogether. And if retailers do that, disabled people, like your listeners are saying, are unlikely to spend any of their money in those shops.
So you've personally had the experience when people just look straight either through you, round you, above you, underneath you, anywhere but at you, to ask you how they could help you?
Absolutely.
So it's a massive miss, this, isn't it, for businesses, because you have money to spend.
Well, you have talked about the Purple Pound, 249 billion consumer spending power of disabled people and their families. But yet, if you listen to your callers, it reflects that 75% of disabled people have left a store or come off a website simply through poor customer service or poor access. And that is a huge lost opportunity.
And we've had a text which says, it's anonymous actually, it says, my young son uses a powered wheelchair. He loves going shopping. Often it's not the shops that are the problem, it's often other shoppers who can be rude and impatient and disrespectful. What we're talking about is so much more than just shopping, isn't it? It's an experience of people with disabilities in a community.
It is, and shopping is a social experience. And why should disabled people not engage in that experience? And I think Peter was talking about his experience online shopping. Most people do online shopping because it's convenient, and most people now do a blended shopping experience online and in store and in shopping centres. And we're saying Purple Tuesday is about saying that should happen to disabled people. And it's really clear that today is Purple Tuesday, but actually what it is about is the next 364 days, and that retailers really make good on their commitments and start to transform those things that are really important to their customers.
Do you ever fear that the retailers who are getting, you've got 700 retailers getting into Purple Tuesday now, that they're bandwagon jumping and they're saying, oh yes, well obviously that makes us look very good and gives us a good image if we do this today and our brand is seen today?
No,
but actually, they're not going to stick with it.
Well, every organisation who has signed up to Purple Tuesday has made at least one commitment, and we have those commitments, and we will be working with all those organisations over the coming months to ensure that what they have pledged and more that they deliver on. So this is not about one day. I think it is very difficult for organisations not to commit and then deliver on their pledges, and we will be working with them and with disabled people to make sure that those are put in place.
Mike Adams, Chief Executive of Purple. Stay with us. Jean Crouch is in St Leonard's in East Sussex. Jean, what's your experience being when you go shopping?
Well, unfortunately, I don't go shopping very much, and it's only when I hear something, as I did this morning at the end of Woman's Hour, that I start assessing my situation and think, well, I am terribly limited, but I try to be grateful for what I can do, and I live where there are free a pharmacy, a post office, and a baker's, all within a very short distance of my home. Also, there's a bus stop where I can sit on the seat and have a rest. So I can do a limited amount of shopping like that, as long as there's not much weight to carry. And also, I have a online shop that my son from Cambridgeshire, if you please, arranges for me sometimes. And all in all, I just manage. But sometimes it's a very poor manage, and I have to tell myself, well, I'm fortunate that I can just cope indoors.
Jean, thank you. Well, Giles Framge is in Wilmslow in Cheshire. Giles, what's your experience been?
Well, the main thing is I have a bus pass, but there's no buses because the local authority had cannot subsidize them. The other problem is I've got a health problem, and I can only go shopping to places where there are toilet facilities available. Now, I live in Hanford, we used to have a toilet facility in Hanford, so that's been taken away. So once every 4 weeks, I've got to get a taxi and go to Wilmslow and go to the supermarket there to do the shopping. And they deliver it to my kitchen. At the same time, they've got toilet facilities available there.
And do you?
I don't blame the local authority at all. I think they provide a good service. The only thing is the government subsidies have been cut to local authorities, and they're in a catch-22 situation. And this is affecting, because it's not only affecting people with bus passes, it's affecting people to get jobs, etc. as well. So I think the transport situation has to be resolved. And also toilet facilities have to be to be resolved to shopping areas, because without toilet facilities, it's not only people who need, everybody needs toilet facilities, even children need it, and disabled people need it.
Giles Framsey, thank you. John Douglas is in the studio with me. John, you've got something very similar to that.
Yeah, just picking up on that. There was someone that wrote in who wants to remain anonymous. She says she has double incontinence, and the absence of toilets within rushing distance is always a big deterrent for her, she says. She writes, some shops have made me quite uncomfortable or show no empathy when I ask to use their toilet. It puts me off leaving the house at all. So perhaps we need a bit more consideration for others, particularly with those hidden disabilities.
Mike Adams, the Chief Executive of Purple, still listening to that. This issue of toilets comes up again and again and again, not least with when we earlier in the programme we were talking about disabled toilets at the tops or bottoms of flights of stairs. How serious is this, do you think?
Well, I think there's two issues, and one which is a resource that we have put out with Crohn's and Colitis UK, which is to highlight the number of people with hidden impairments. 80% of the disabled population have hidden impairments, and for many of them they need to use accessible toilets. And we have put out a sign today that we're hoping that retail will adopt. It's not statutory, but we're hoping they'll adopt as good practice, that says not every disability is visible. And we want to raise awareness of those people who absolutely require the provision of accessible toilets in shops and in shopping centres. So I think that's one issue, and that's a really important issue. And the other one is a straightforward one, that accessible toilets are there because they're accessible toilets, and they shouldn't be full of buckets and mops and everything else.
Yes, the clue is in the title, isn't it?
That is what, and if you are unable to go shopping and go to the toilet with dignity, you're unlikely to go shopping. So accessible toilets should be for those who require to use them.
Mike, thank you. Well, Fiammetta Ali is in Streatham in South London. Fiammetta, I know you want to spend your money.
Yes, but quite often I can't get into the shop because it doesn't have a ramp. And this happens repeatedly, actually. And I just think, I don't think the shops realise that they lose a lot of money. I mean, morally they should have ramps, and by law they should have ramps. But it's also in their interest, surely, to allow access. If I can't get in to a pub or a bar because of steps, then I'm not going in there with my group of friends. So they're missing out on all their money as well. So it just seems short-sighted from their point of view too.
I know you've had similar experiences in the cinema.
Yes. So I have a row with my cinema every time I go there because they've only got a few accessible screens, and there's been a lot of trouble with that. But it's just the thing. Things are in the accessible screen for only a few days, and as soon as I get round to going to see them, they've all disappeared off upstairs.
Fiammetta, thank you. Well, Toby, I know you're on a mobile phone. Where are you?
I'm in Basingstoke.
And what's your experience been?
Well, it's. I agree with every single caller you've had at the moment. It's a much wider question than just in shops. It is cinemas and everything else as well. The experience I've had is when you go into a shopping centre or a shop or wherever, and the looks you get from people. So normally I don't carry a symbol cane. I do now and again. However, I try not to, purely because of my disability is this hidden disability that we all talk about. And you'll display your disability, your cane or whatever, and you'll get the most bizarrest of looks from people. Even if you're walking down an alley or something, it will be, well, okay, I can see and I can pick out my products, my shopping, whatever. However, just because I have a cane in my hand, that gives you the right to have a look at me, to kind of look at me in a bit of a disgusting way. It's it's a really, really bizarre point.
Toby, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Toby. The phone line is really poor and I can only just hear you. So I'm going to leave it for the moment, if that's all right. Melvin Frost is on. Melvin, you have similar visual impairments, don't you?
Yes, yeah.
And what's your experience been?
Well, it's always been positive. I find no difficulties at all because I find I can ask people in shops. The title is a shop assistant, or they start calling themselves colleagues now. The word is assistants. So you go up and ask somebody and say to them, I can't see well, can you find me so-and-so? And they will find it for me, or direct me to the right place. I've got limited sight, but I can see well enough to find an item if I want it. But I even ask fellow customers, could you just check me the date on that, please? For a best before date. I don't understand why people are reluctant to ask an assistant. I ask fellow customers, and they're always pleased to help. They just sort of say, well, yes, certainly I can do that for you, or pick an item down for me if it's too high. I mean, I'm not tall, but I very often help little old ladies to reach up something off a top shelf because they can see where it is, and I can reach it for them and get it down for them. So, it's a two-way street, really, and I don't see why people are reluctant to ask.
Melvin, I'd just let me quickly ask you. Some people are nervous of asking because they're worried about offending people. They're a bit frightened. I mean, obviously you're lovely and friendly, but some people might not be.
Well, again, if you're frightened, I suppose you're not going to be going out at all. Going out it can be a difficult experience. Crossing a road can be a difficult experience, but you have to make yourself do it. It's just one part of life. It's like getting old. You learn to do things in a different way.
Melvin, thank you. Well, Jill Allen King is in Southend. Jill, you again, visual impairment is what you're experiencing.
Yes, I'm totally blind, and my husband's partially sighted, and we've been campaigning on access issues for years now. And one of the problems we have is the print on the actual packages in the supermarket.
Jill, I'm going to stop you there because you're famous. You have to tell me why you're famous first before you can go on to the packaging.
Okay. Well, I've initiated the tactile paving at pedestrian crossings because what was happening, they were flattening the curves, quite rightly, for people using wheelchairs. And blind people didn't know if they were on the pavement or in the road. So back in the 70s, I was working with the Department of Transport, and we had somewhere here that I knew when I was up to somebody's gate, and it was tactile. So after 2 years research, tactile paving was introduced as a British standard in July 1983.
So what you're describing are those dimples. When you get to a pedestrian crossing, you push the button, you're standing on the dimples, and you invented them.
Yeah.
Wow.
But what's happened is, because that they've introduced now the shared spaces, which has defeated all the planning and all the work that we went into to try and get that tactile paving. And now they've taken away the audible signals and the pedestrian crossings, which have left these shared spaces, and we've got two like in Southend here, and they're illegal crossings. And even though the government have now put a pause on it, they're still introducing them. And, it makes getting around very, very difficult. I've just been in Brussels and France for the weekend, Belgium and France for the weekend, and there they've got hardly any tactile crossings at all, and we only heard one audible signal the whole 4 days that we were there. So we are a little better here, but we've really got to fight all the time to keep those environmental help that is for all of us, all people with disabilities.
Jill Allen King, thank you for calling us. Mike Adams, the Chief Executive of Purple. We're just coming to the end of the programme. But what Jill described there as a real advantage, the dimples on the pavements, as simple as that, being taken away with from these shared space areas, that must have an impact on people when they go shopping.
Oh, absolutely, and it was great to hear what Jill has done. And one of the things that Purple Tuesday is doing is asking disabled people to talk about their retail experiences and where there has been good practice and where there has been challenges. If you were a store manager, what would you do? What is the solution? So we want more Jills in this world in the coming 12 months to support retail with what the solutions are. And I think Purple Tuesday is about disabled people not just managing, as Jean has said, but really having a quality shopping experience. And way to do that is to raise awareness with retailers about what can be done, what needs to be done in terms of that hello, can I help you mindset, and recognising that for retailers it's about quality customer service, and there is the purple pound that they can tap into as well.
Mike Adams, Chief Executive of Purple, thank you for joining us. That's all for today. On tomorrow's programme, the woman who's been paid back thousands of pounds after wrongly being charged care home top-up fees, why senior doctors are warning against home blood test kits, and when all that glitters is not diamonds. You'll hear how one criminal gang got caught. Join Winifred tomorrow at 12:15.